Where there's a bang, there's yang. Gyroscopes like this beautiful Victorian gyro, all with its own weights and contraptions. I'm going to spin it and immediately ask a volunteer to come and give it a push. So first of all, I'll spin. Now, someone come and just put your finger on this little button here and push towards me very gently. Again, keep pushing. Thank you. It didn't yield to her push, you see. It will go either way. It did something different. Now, we call that something different precession, and I shall have a lot more to say about precession in a few minutes. The Jabberwock was a monster with many heads. It was as if it was, for me, a representative of the way we divide our science into physics, chemistry, biology, and then we take one of those, like physics, and we divide it into heat, light, sound, electricity, and magnetism, and we subdivide that, and so on. Now, some of these heads of the Jabberwock are really laws of physics, I suppose, for me, and some of them look into mirrors and see their own reflections, and they then think there are more of their kind than there really are. The same can probably, from an engineering point of view, be said about the so-called fundamental particles. They try to coexist with each other. Now, the idea of science, in rather perhaps the profession of science, as a monster, is not a new one. Martin Gardner, my favourite author, put it in a neat way in a chapter on the fall of parity. And we talked about parity last time and said that parity was to do with the universe as a whole being handed, having a preference for left or right-handedness without saying which. And Martin Gardner wrote this: "Not one of the three experiments that first toppled parity would have been performed at the time it was performed if Li and Yang had not told the experimentalists what to do. Li had no experience whatever in a laboratory. Yang had worked very briefly in a lab at the University of Chicago, where he was once a kind of assistant to the great Italian physicist Enrico Fermi. He had not been happy in experimental work. His associates had even made up a short rhyme about him, which Bernstein reports. Where there's a bang, there's yang." Laboratory bangs, went on Martin Gardner, can range all the way from an exploding test tube, or in our case, a Mr. Coates special, to the explosion of a hydrogen bomb. But the really big bangs, went on Martin Gardner, are the bangs that occur in the heads of theoretical physicists when they try to put together the pieces handed to them by experimental physicists. One of the things that you may not have been made sufficiently aware of is that there is apparently no simple connection between gravitational mass and inertial mass. When you compare two masses, you can do it either by weighing each on the same spring balance, or by subjecting each to a known force and measuring its acceleration. And the two methods always agree in the answers absolutely. And so, although there's no simple connection, these two heads of the monster must in some way be a curious kind of reflection, the one from the other. Now, in the Jabberwock nonsense rhyme, Lewis Carroll invented some lovely new words, especially for me, slithy and mimsy. They were explained later as combinations of other words which allowed him to express two ideas at once. Lithe and slimy gave rise to slithy. Miserable and flimsy gave rise to mimsy. Now, engineers have been employing this word combination idea for some time, and at first I must say that the words were scorned by the pure scientists because they didn't describe anything that was quantifiable. You couldn't measure it, so it didn't exist. That is a philosophy of its own. But one of the useful ones, which has now become respectable, I will demonstrate to you with the help of 4 blocks of metal on a nicely polished plane surface, and I am going to tilt the plane and see whether all the blocks slide off together as the good book of applied mechanics tells us they should. When the angle of the plane, oh dear, there's one gone already. When the angle of the plane reaches the angle of friction, they should all slide together. But I'm afraid they don't. And if you want to repeat this experiment, you'll have to polish the plane very carefully and clean the blocks. Now, the angle of friction determines the coefficient of friction. Last lecture, I promised you jam tomorrow. Jam you shall have. And tomorrow you shall say we had jam yesterday. Strawberry jam. Now we will do an experiment in friction. I can see myself getting into trouble with some of your mums when you get home and start doing this. Now let us see what the good mechanics book has to say about the laws of friction. That's gone. the friction was increased. Mu had a bigger value. Mu for that one has a very large value. Mu equals, nearly, the lot, nearly infinity. The angle of friction is now 90, and mu is infinity. We can handle infinity, but what about more than infinity? Now you know what's going to happen. After a while, they're going to peel themselves slowly off the goo and drop. And you see that you made the difficulty for yourselves by defining a coefficient of friction such that if they stuck on the vertical, the coefficient of friction was infinity. A lot of rubbish. The engineer knows what he's doing. He knows what's going on. And it is the job of the engineer to interpret science. You mustn't let it get too pure that it becomes a nonsense. And as far as I'm concerned, I go along with Humpty Dumpty. When I use a word, said Humpty Dumpty, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. And so say I with emphasis. For after what I thought to be a clear exposition of a subject in this theatre last November, my use of the conservation of momentum principle was interpreted as a claim to have created momentum out of nothing. How anyone with a PhD could get that wrong, I cannot imagine. But when the journalistic editor got at it, the headline was something like, "Newton was wrong, says Professor." Professor said nothing of the kind. But from then it's a short step to perpetual motion, energy creation from nowhere, and half the crackpots in the kingdom are writing to me, solving the world's energy crisis. It's like the whispering game at a party. After that follows the slings and arrows. You have no idea. And talking of crackpots, Freeman Dyson made these comments in an article in the Scientific American. Most of the crackpot papers which are submitted to the physical review are rejected, not because it is impossible to understand them, but because it is possible. Those which are impossible to understand are usually published. In the same article, he wrote of a lecture in New York by Pauli to a group of scientists that included no less a person than Niels Bohr. In the discussion that followed the talk, younger scientists were sharply critical of Pauli. Bohr rose to speak. "We are all agreed," he said to Pauli, "that your theory is crazy. The question which divides us is whether it is crazy enough to have a chance of being correct." Now, circularity is a powerful concept. In circular motion, there is magic, as there is in that other thing we call electromagnetism. But like that subject, the magic is not apparent until it is like, shall we say, rather than its reflection, it's like its neighboring head, truly three-dimensional. A coil of wire in 1830 was said to have a property all its own, which was called resistance. This was a property of this coil. You could measure it by measuring the ratio of the voltage across it to the current flowing in it. So I will pass some DC into the coil. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, you go. Pass AC into this coil. We've got about 5 amps of it, have we? No, less than that. We want some more. That's it. About 5 amps of that, yeah. And then we can use a second coil merely connected to a voltmeter. When I put this second coil on the top, it gets some induced voltage by a mechanism which I do not understand, and I suspect neither does anyone else. But if I turn the second coil at right angles, it's always been our experience, you can find a place where the voltage is zero, as long as the coils remain at right angles. It's as if they lived in separate worlds and didn't want to know about each other. Now, in that respect, I was reminded by a drawing by M.C. Escher, who's done many marvelous drawings, that it was like the drawing of the men on the staircase. And of them, the artist himself said, "Here we have 3 forces of gravity working perpendicular to one another. Here is an artist being more of a scientist than we are ourselves. 3 earth planes," he said, "cut across each other at right angles, and human beings are living on each of them. It is impossible for the inhabitants of different worlds to walk or sit or stand on the same floor, because they have different conceptions of what is horizontal and what is vertical. Yet they may well share the use of the same staircase. On the top staircase, illustrated here, 2 people are moving side by side and in the same direction, and yet one of them is obviously going downstairs and the other upstairs. Contact between them is out of the question, because they live in 2 different worlds and therefore can have no knowledge of each other's existence." They remind me sometimes of a chemist and an engineer. Although the artist has only used a trick of perspective to influence the mind of the observer, it is a lively, healthy influence indeed for me. Gyroscopes are essentially circular things. A scientific gyro is usually mounted in gimbal rings. So that there is the wheel, here is the inner ring, here is the outer ring. All three sets of pivots, the axes pass through the centre of mass of the gyro. Now I will tell you what precession is. A torque, by the way, is a twisting force. Instead of a push, which is a force, you push a thing which is pivoted and it twists. So torque is a twisting force. The result of the twisting force is a movement, a rotation, but not in the axis in which you apply the torque. And we call that precession. So I put a torque on the outer ring, it is the inner that precesses. I put a torque on the inner ring, it is the outer that precesses. It will work in either direction. Oh, you're cheating, I can hear my critics saying. You're pulling it round as well as doing that. All right, we will satisfy the critics. We will hang a weight from the inner ring so that gravity, and not I, shall put on the torque. And there you see a precession. Not the sort of movement you really expected, because you are accustomed in higher mathematics to a torque producing an acceleration. Here, a torque produces purely a rotation. And if I put 3 times the mass on, I get 3 times the angular velocity. A different sort of device from our common experience. Now, what I want you to notice this time is, I'll spin it up again because it's getting a little slow. I want you to notice how it accelerates when I put the weight on and how it decelerates, especially how it decelerates. Having been convinced that a torque produces a velocity and not an acceleration, it must have an acceleration or it couldn't increase its velocity at all. And it must have a deceleration when it stops. So let us see if you can determine the rate of deceleration from that sort of angular velocity. When it comes round, I'm going to catch the weight and watch it stop. Hop. Ready again? Hop. There is an acceleration, but it is of a simply enormous value. Let us try increasing the torque by increasing the radius at which things happen. I put this long arm on, and of course it will precess anyway now because of the out of balance mass there, but I can now hang a weight on there and the precession rate increases because the radius is increased. And if I hang it on further along, I get a still bigger precession rate. If I hang it right at the end, you will see it do something else besides merely go round at constant speed. I think I need a fresh spin. Hang on. Incidentally, this shaft has a peg in it. When you buy a toy gyroscope, it has a hole in it. The first thing to do when you bought a toy gyro is to fill the hole in with a peg that sticks out, because you break the string in the hole, and you never do from a peg. Right, we'll reinsert the torque arm. Come on. Yep. And when it comes round, I'm going to hang this weight on, and I'm going to let it drop rather fiercely. You see it going up and down as it goes around? That process is called nutation. It is the result of an acceleration as well as a pure precession. Now, the two worlds. The fact that I can press on that and produce a precession of that, either way, has got nothing to do with the fact that I can press on that and produce a precession that way. Because I can hang a weight on this side, and at the same time, I can then attempt to make it go faster than it was going before by pushing on there, just like our volunteer was. And you see, the weight comes up or down. Now we've got something new, because a weight rising means an increase in potential energy. Where did the energy come from? The answer was it came from my finger, because now my finger was moving as it pushed. When I pushed on it and it was stationary, it didn't yield at all, so there was no power input. And even though there's movement of the inner ring, there is no power output, because that moves without being capable of producing any torque. If I resist that motion, then of course it immediately gives way to me. So these are the two worlds, separated for you, as they never are in electromagnetism. We have again been able to make the invisible visible, to dare to make the intangible tangible. Now, scientific gyros are beautiful things like this in gimbal rings that maintain their axis of spin, but the real magic lay in the toy gyroscope. the one you've seen come down the string. Toy gyros are usually supplied with a little Eiffel Tower model, and one of the standard tricks you're supposed to do is to spin the gyro, put it sideways on the tower, thus allowing the force of gravity down on that to be reacted by a normal force from the top of the tower. So you're putting a torque on about a horizontal axis, and that will make the gyro precess about a vertical axis, and everyone is amused. And no one takes it seriously because it is, after all, a toy, isn't it? Fine. Most interesting demonstration. Let us just weigh these two things. First of all, we will weigh the gyroscope. Where's the old bill? That's it. We will weigh the gyro, and we find it to be 310 grams. There are 312 grams. We will weigh the tower and find it to be less than a gram. So over 300 times the weight of the tower. Now, haven't we missed something? Thank you, Bill. What did we miss? We missed the fact that if you ever try to rotate something which is eccentric, not symmetrical, you tend to, yeah, somebody knows, they've tried. You tend to shake your bones to pieces. Now, what is happening when I do that? Apart from me getting terrible shaking, the whole of this is trying to retain its centre of mass fixed. Let us look at the gyro again with that sort of thought in mind. Surely 300 grams compared to 1 gram, you would expect the 300 grams to want to stay in the same place, and you'd expect it to move the tower around itself. But of course it is our common experience that although that happens, the gyro on the tower does not make the tower go round the gyro. 300 times the mass. Whoops. Sorry about that. Can you screw him back in his bearings? Friction on the table. I can hear my critics now. He has friction. We thought we would remove as much of the friction as we could by spinning it on ice. Yeah. Oh, it's come off the carbon. Try it. We estimate that the coefficient of friction between the tower and the ice is about 0.02, which is just about as small as one could expect to get without going to something exotic. It's a little bit tight on the bearing, Benny. Could you give me the pliers? Did you do it up with your fingers? Yes. Oh, it's all right, I can manage. Just a wee bit tight on the pivot. Ah, thank you, Bill. This, of course, is an adjustable gyro. This belongs to an earlier age. Nowadays, they make the flywheels out of aluminium, and what better metal than something that's one of the lightest we know for making a flywheel. So, there it is. This is the modern high standard of living. This is an old-fashioned gyro, about 30, 40, 50 years ago. We have some gyros here today that are 100 years old. So here's a thought. This thing has been with us for 100 years, and we haven't noticed those things which we might have noticed. A tower on ice. Are you convinced? I was.